Putin has signed a decree to make Russia's withdrawal from the INF treaty official. Russia continues to insist that they have not been in breach of the treaty despite repeated accusations from U.S. leaders. Daniel McAdams of the Ron Paul Institute joins Scotty Nell Hughes to discuss the development and other U.S. foreign policy blunders around the world. So let's take a look at this.
By the United States, Russia will also pull out of the landmark Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a decree making the suspension of the Cold War-era arms treaty official. Now, it was set to expire in less than 6 months. The Trump administration announced the formal suspension of the treaty in February after it accused the Russian government of non-compliance. Russia denies the breaches, but the fallout is sparking fears of a possible repeat of past missile crisis. For more, return to Daniel McAdams, Executive Director of the Ron Paul Institute. Thanks for joining us, Daniel.
Thanks, Scotty.
Okay, so now that Russia will officially pull out of the INF Treaty, have we reached a point of no return when it comes to weapons control between Russia and the United States?
Well, I don't think that we necessarily have. It's never over until it's over. However, it looks relatively grim right now, and I think the question is why now all of a sudden the U.S. has been following what it claims are the Russian creation of these SSC-8 missiles, which they claim are in violation of the treaty. They've been following it for 10 or 15 years of development. Why have they not raised the issue until now? I think it's a pretext. This is a pretext for something that the U.S. has wanted to do all along. Both sides claim that there are violations. To me, that seems like a reasonable reason to sit down at the table and see if you can split the difference. But unfortunately, it doesn't appear that that's what was on the agenda for the U.S. side.
Well, Daniel, I have to look at the timing of this, as we've just come off of a weekend in Vietnam where there was not a treaty reached between North Korea and the United States to denuclearize. Do you think that has anything to do with Russia today pulling out of this treaty, knowing that there was not one confirmed between the United States and North Korea last week?
Well, I think it has something to do with Hurricane Bolton. You know, this is the guy who hates international treaties with a passion. He doesn't want the U.S. to be bound by any sort of agreements, but of course he likes other countries to be bound by agreements. I think it's pretty well reported now that Bolton played a big hand in the blow-up of the North Korea talks, throwing additional things on the table, which caused Kim to walk away. Certainly, he's very involved in destroying the INF treaty between the U.S. and Russia. So unfortunately, it's the neocons that are around President Trump. We've heard recently that Bolton is now getting the daily intel briefings, and he's giving the highlights to Trump. That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Well, last week, right before they did go into that meeting, President Trump...
And we've been talking quite a bit about Bolton, I feel, in the past couple of weeks. And, you know, he's just one of the most glaring examples of how Donald Trump is not draining the swamp. He had campaigned on building a wall, draining the swamp, you know, America first. He's kind of been doing the America first part. And he is slowly piecing together the wall, which, by the way, I don't think is any serious deterrent for illegal immigrants. They need more, as I've said, they need more presence. They need Border Patrol and Army stationed at the border. That's how you limit illegal immigration. Well, also by cutting off the welfare to illegal immigrants. That alone would stem the tide. But as far as draining the swamp, Trump has not done anything. He's been filling the swamp. And one of the most famous snippets from the debates.
After getting the subpoena, you delete 33,000 emails, and then you acid wash them, or bleach them, as you would say, a very expensive process. So we're going to get a special prosecutor, and we're going to look into it, because you know what? People have been Their lives have been destroyed for doing 1/5 of what you've done, and it's a disgrace. And honestly, you ought to be ashamed of yourself.
Secretary Clinton, I want to follow up on that. I'm going to let you talk about emails.
Because everything he just said is absolutely false, but I'm not surprised. In the first debate,
And the audience needs to calm down here.
And the thing about that, we're diverting again, but the thing about that, she said it's all fake. She never deleted the emails. But FBI and aide destroyed 2 of Clinton's phones by breaking them in half or hitting them with a hammer. So not only did she delete a bunch of emails that she put on her private server where foreign entities could hack in there and take that information, which was basically what the theory is that was like a private marketplace, a secret marketplace for information. She put some information on this private server. Foreign actors would hack into it. And then all of a sudden the Clinton Foundation gets some donations. So that's how that scheme was running. So yeah, why would you need someone to break your phones with a hammer? An aide to former President Bill Clinton destroyed 2 of Hillary Clinton's phones by using physical force, according to documents released by the FBI on Friday. So, you know, you think this aide would do that on her or his or her own volition? No, that's something that. Listen, man, Clinton's a war criminal, just like a lot of, just like mostly all the presidents. Pretty much all the presidents and cabinet members who have been complicit in terrorist actions and in illegal wars. But that's just to show that there is some, there's some evidence. There's a lot of evidence to the wrongdoings of Hillary Clinton. The thing is that her supporters are kind of brainwashed into supporting her, but I think more and more Democrats are recognizing how toxic Hillary Clinton is, and if she was president, she would be probably an even worse president. We'd probably be at have another serious war going on, aside from the however many other foreign theaters we have troops in.
It would be impossible to be fact-checking Donald all the time. I'd never get to talk about anything I want to do and how we're going to really make lives better for people. So once again, go to HillaryClinton.com. We have literally Trump. You can fact check him in real time. Last time at the first debate,
You can fact check him in real time.
we'll have millions more fact checking because it is. It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Yeah, because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
That's like one of the most epic comeback. Man, those debates were hilarious. But again, Trump has never drained the swamp. He basically, from the cabinet that he had, he basically eliminated most of the people, like a lot of his advisors and stuff, like Bannon and Manafort and whatever, and he casted them to the side, and then he just started bringing in neocons like John Bolton and others, which are just continuing the same foreign policy that the United States has been following for decades, since the Cold War, or even before the Cold War.
did tweet out his optimism, saying, however, he was looking forward to help from a financial standpoint in making sure that North Korea had a successful future from China, Russia, South Korea, Japan. So do you think he would assume that the same thing would also be necessary in regards to a nuclear solution, hence why possibly Russia pulling out of this now and creating a deal that might be universal across several different countries might be a good thing that could come out of this situation?
Well, a multilateral approach is probably necessary. The pretext for the U.S. pulling out probably is China. The U.S. has been pretty aggressive in the South China Sea. They want the ability to have missiles in this range of 500 to 5,000 kilometers, which they've been prohibited from having since the INF Treaty back in the 80s. So that's probably the real reason the U.S. wants out of it. So why not just try to expand talks, include China, see if you can make a deal this way? I think, again, we go back to Hurricane Bolton on that one.
Well, that's the question right now, is Hurricane Bolton and what role he does play. But another question is, where does this put the position of many other European countries? It can't be good to be centered between Russia and the United States right now.
That's a key issue, Scotty. And, the German Foreign Minister Maas actually went to Moscow. He met with his Russian counterpart Lavrov to see what they could do to try to solve this. The last thing the Europeans want is to be a battleground in a U.S.-Russia conflict. The EU Foreign Policy Director Mogherini is also on record saying she's very concerned about the end of the INF Treaty. She talks about Europe having so much to lose if it's over. So the Europeans, maybe this may be the spur that lets the Europeans move to a more independent foreign policy.
Well, Daniel, technology is always an issue. One of the reasons why I think we're even talking about this, because they're trying to update where everybody stands at the nuclear capabilities. There are reports that one of the reasons why the U.S. wanted to pull out of the treaty was because China was starting to gain an advantage as they developed their missile technology. Is this a legitimate concern and a reason why both Russia and the U.S. would like to see China agree in this new capability and be brought into some form of a nuclear treaty as well?
Well, it also depends on what your foreign policy is. And unfortunately, the U.S. has a foreign policy of world domination. And when you have that, you have to always have the absolute upper hand. It's great if you're in the military-industrial complex. I'm sure they're wringing their hands with glee over the possibility of making a whole new range of missiles that will make billions and trillions of dollars. So that certainly is a case. If the China issue, again, is an issue to be discussed, and have a trilateral discussion about it rather than simply pulling out. Maybe it'll be salvaged, but again, you go back to Bolton. With Bolton in there, I think it's pretty unlikely. Okay, Dan, I cannot let you go without bringing you in on and ask you a question of something that's just come into the headlines here in the past few hours. It's being reported that Senator Rand Paul is going to oppose President Donald Trump's national emergency declaration, calling them extra constitutional powers. Why is this happening, as it's going to cause him to actually vote not only against the president, but against the Republicans, and be able to actually topple this to where the president will not be able to have his executive order to build his wall? What is the thinking behind this? Well, certainly Congress has fallen down on its obligations as a co-equal branch of government for decades, allowing the president to rule as a dictator. And it's not just about Trump. Certainly Obama did the same thing, Bush, and president after president before him, ruling by executive order. We go around the world telling everyone else what kind of democracy they should have, yet our Constitution, of course, is being flattened by these presidents who rule by decree. So certainly if you're interested in our constitutional form of government, a separation of powers, then it's a good move to smack down the president sometimes when he exceeds his constitutional authority. Well, Daniel, thank you so much. I know this is going to be a continuing story, and I have a feeling we might even have you back on this week to continue this discussion. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, YouTube.
So I can understand why, the deal had to be broken off. But, as I stated, it probably could have been handled better. And the person at fault is John Bolton, who, is used to tackling problems with a hammer. So if as that somebody had said that in a video that we looked at before, he said that if the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem is going to look like a nail. So Bolton's idea of foreign policy is just strong arming different countries and threatening them, and that kind of stuff.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the weekly report. Did Bolton blow North Korea? President Trump's second summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un last week was criticized by both parties in Washington long before Air Force One even touched down in Hanoi. Washington's political class seemed terrified that the nearly 70-year state of war with North Korea might actually end. In the end, the only positive thing they could say about the meeting was that Trump apparently walked away with nothing to show for it. The location of the meeting, Hanoi, Vietnam, serves as a great example of what can be won in peace versus what is lost in war. After losing nearly 60,000 U.S. service members in an unnecessary war that took 1 million Vietnamese lives, the U.S. loss of the Vietnam War resulted not in a communist takeover of the Southeast Asia, but something very different. The domino theory failed because communism was destined to fail. Now we are close trading partners with an increasingly pro-market Vietnam. The result of trade and exchange versus war is a better life for all. Unfortunately for Washington, the real lesson of Vietnam has not been learned. That is why the Republicans, Democrats, and entire mainstream media spoke as one against President Trump's decision to take a bold step and actually meet again one-on-one with one of our enemies to see if we can avoid nuclear conflict. One leading Democrat, House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff, attacked Trump for being with Kim because speaking to the North Korean gives him legitimacy. Does it make any sense that we should not even speak with our nuclear-armed adversaries because it gives them legitimacy? He'd rather have a nuclear war as long as Kim remains illegitimate. This is sadly the kind of thinking that prevails in Washington. The media reported that Trump walked away from the meeting before the scheduled signing ceremony and closing press event. The talks broke down, it was reported, because Kim demanded an end to all sanctions before any reduction in North Korea's nuclear arsenal. Washington sighed with relief and said altogether, better no deal than a bad deal. Meanwhile, the North Koreans held a rare press conference clarifying that they only asked for partial sanctions relief in exchange for dismantling one of their main nuclear facilities. Further, press reports began to surface that National Security Advisor John Bolton threw additional demands on the table, which led Kim to draw the meeting to an early close. Who's telling the truth? We likely won't know, but given Bolton's strong opposition to any kind of peace agreement with North Korea, it's hard to doubt that he had something to do with the blow-up of the summit. As the New York Times reported over the weekend, while Trump's advisors were shocked when he decided to meet with Kim face-to-face the first time for negotiations, John Bolton wasn't worried at all. As the Times wrote, Mr. Bolton told colleagues not to worry. The negotiations, he said, would collapse on their own, and so they did. Will Trump continue to allow his diplomatic efforts to be undermined by his own staff? Let's hope the president will ignore Washington, ignore the neocons, and continue work for peace with North Korea. Thanks for listening.
Good morning, and welcome to Face the Nation.
Yeah, so Ron Paul just basically argued what I was saying pretty much exactly last week in regards to Venezuela and foreign policy in general. You can see that in this clip, how the U.S. can resolve conflict with Venezuela. That's on my YouTube, youtube.com/TheMCFaceman. Make sure to subscribe to me and click the button for notifications so that you can keep up with all the videos if you're not watching live on Twitch every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is when the Sunday morning show airs every week. So Ron Paul was just reiterating the same points Instead of strong arming foreign countries, we should be offering them lucrative trade deals, win-win situations, not situations where we're getting the deficit, not situations like Obama made with China, where we're getting the raw end of the deal and sending all our business to China. We need to do deals with nations that benefit both of us. We need to create interdependent relationships with foreign powers so that the thought of eliminating us or taking down America is not even a thought. The United States is already an integral part of the global economy. The U.S. dollar is still the preferred trading currency. English is the preferred language internationally when doing business. We're in a position to, continue being successful if we play our cards right. The thing is, there's so many snakes in government, so many criminals looking to get the easy money and looking to just, sell their souls to, reach whatever goals, whatever power and financial goals that they have.
We begin today with President Trump's National Security Advisor, Ambassador John Bolton. Good to have you here.
Glad to be with you.
We had different versions of the story as to why this summit failed to produce any results. Why was the president unable to negotiate a breakthrough?
Well, I don't consider the summit a failure. I consider it a success defined as the president protecting and advancing American national interest. There was extensive preparation for this meeting, extensive discussions between the president and Kim Jong-un, and the issue really was whether North Korea was prepared to accept what the president called the big deal, which is denuclearize entirely. Under a definition the president handed to Kim Jong-un, and have the potential for an enormous economic future, or try and do something less than that, which was unacceptable to us. So the president held firm to his view. He deepened his relationship with Kim Jong-un. I don't view it as a failure at all when American national interests are protected.
But to be clear, North Korea still has not agreed to denuclearize as the U.S. defines it.
Not as we have defined it, although they have committed in public in prior regimes in North Korea 4 or 5 times in writing to denuclearize, and it's something
so that doesn't mean much to you.
We expect them to do if they reach an agreement with us.
Well, on the specifics, a senior State Department official spoke to reporters and said that what the North Koreans proposed specifically was about dismantling the 3-mile Yongbyon complex, which he defined as, quote, the totality of North Korea's plutonium reprocessing and uranium enrichment programs in exchange for lifting all sanctions except those on the weapons programs. Did the U.S. make a counteroffer?
Well, the counteroffer has been there from the beginning, from the very first summit back in Singapore, which is if North Korea commits to complete denuclearization, including its ballistic missile program and its chemical and biological weapons programs, the prospect of economic progress is there. The president,
but that's not what North Korea put on the table.
That's
put
not
on
what they. That's
this
not,
narrow definition.
A very limited concession by the North Koreans involving the Yongbyon complex, which includes an aging nuclear reactor and some percentage of their uranium enrichment, plutonium reprocessing capabilities. In exchange, they wanted substantial relief from the sanctions. Now, one thing President Trump has said beginning in the 2016 campaign is that he's not going to make the mistakes of prior administrations and get into this action for action kind of arrangement, which
so
benefits
there was no counteroffer.
The North Koreans. Our counteroffer was where we have been, where the president has exercised his persuasive abilities on Kim Jong-un to take the big deal, and they weren't willing to do it.
But what made the president stake out this maximalist position? You've negotiated with the North Koreans before, going back to 2002. Did you see the same pattern playing out now?
I think the difference that President Trump has articulated to the North Koreans is the future for them once they make the strategic decision to denuclearize. What they've done before is promise to denuclearize, get economic benefits in return, and then renege on the deal. What the president was trying to get them to do was look at what was possible for them overall. And I think he remains optimistic that this is possible. Kim Jong-un himself said in our last meeting, you know, we're going to go through many stations before we achieve this deal. The meeting in Hanoi was one such station. So the president's ready to keep talking.
Are you expecting North Korea to come back with an offer?
I don't know what they're going to do. I think the president himself said that he expects they'll want to go back and reevaluate what happened. Certainly we will. We'll look at continuing the economic sanctions against North Korea, which brought them to the table in the first place. We'll see what happens next.
But in the meantime, North Korea can still produce nuclear fuel.
And they have been doing it. Yes, they have. That's exactly correct.
So they're a growing threat.
Well, I think our objective remains to find a way to get them to denuclearize. The president's trying this negotiation, but his objective has always been denuclearization.
Is the window for diplomacy about to close here? I mean, this seems like an open-ended timeline.
I wouldn't say it that way. Look, the president opened the door for North Korea and Singapore, and they didn't walk through. He kept the door open.
8 months ago.
He kept the door open during that 8-month period. He kept it open in Hanoi. The North Koreans can walk through it. It's really up to them. That's the diplomatic window.
When you were on this program last July, though, you said the plan was to dismantle North Korea's nuclear facilities and have it turn over its weapons of mass destruction within a year. Is that still a realistic timeline?
No, the question you asked then was operationally, how long would it take? There was some dispute within the U.S. government over a period of time. Once North Korea made the strategic decision to give up its weapons of mass destruction, ballistic missiles, how long would it take to conduct that dismantlement? And with a few exceptions, our judgment was we could finish it within a year once the process started.
So you still think it'll take a year to dismantle it, but you acknowledge they haven't even agreed to denuclearize.
No, they have not.
And there's no
exactly.
expiration date on this offer to continue to negotiate.
There's no expiration date. As I say, the president is fully prepared to keep negotiating at lower levels or to speak to Kim Jong-un again
But
when
aren't
it's
they a
appropriate.
growing threat if they can continue to develop nuclear fuel? Doesn't the leverage get reduced on our end?
I don't think the leverage gets reduced because I think we will keep the maximum pressure campaign in place. Even before the summit, we were looking at ways to tighten it up to stop.
I'm wondering how the interviewer is sounding like more of a hawk than John Bolton.
For example, the ship-to-ship transfers that the North Koreans are using to evade the sanctions, to talk to other countries to make sure they tighten up on North Korea. It was the sanctions that brought the North Koreans to the table. It's the sanctions they want relief from, and relief they can get if they denuclearize.
Before the president went to Hanoi, was the U.S. aware that North Korea would not allow anything beyond the Yongbyon complex, in this second uranium enrichment site that the president nodded to in his press conference? Did you know that was not on the table?
Well, we don't know what's on the table from North Korea until it comes out of the mouth of Kim Jong-un, the chairman.
Well, that's what the diplomats are supposed to be laying the groundwork for, so the president doesn't walk away with a failure.
He didn't walk away with a failure. Unless you're prepared to say that it would be better to accept a bad deal than to walk away from no deal, to me, that's a success.
So you thought that nothing else was on the table. You were just testing the prospects by sending the president to Hanoi.
No. We honestly didn't know. I mean, it's not unusual in these circumstances to find that there are additional concessions that the other side might make. But we've tried to make it clear to them, again, the president has said this repeatedly, we're not going to make the mistakes of past administrations. We're not going to make the mistake that Obama made in the Iran nuclear deal. What we want is denuclearization broadly defined as the president himself laid out for Kim Jong-un in the paper that he gave him.
So, but you've tested this proposition now of what it's like to negotiate top down.
Well, we've had two meetings.
Commander-in-Chief to try to do this. It was a very different approach, but the success rate hasn't been anything more than in the past.
Well, the success rate in the past was 0. So that's not a hard bar to overcome. There's an argument that proceeding deductively rather than inductively makes a lot of sense. We've had 2 meetings. We'll see.
I gotta wonder, like, okay, does the interviewer like just trying to make John Bolton look like not as much of a hawk, or I mean, what kind of expectation does she have as far as like coming up with a nuclear deal with a hermit kingdom, literally called the Hermit Kingdom, isolated country, communist, run by an ideologue, someone who the North Korean people have to refer to as like their god, Okay, once and once they do denuclearize, Kim Jong Un is immediately a target, immediately a threat, immediately threatened by his own people and foreign governments, including the United States, that could easily just stage his death. That's why he doesn't want to give him up, because that's the only way he can keep on his insane show, pretending to be God, and continuing his family's legacy as the rulers of North Korea. It's gonna take. If they ever denuclearize, which I think the odds are not that great, to be honest. I think Kim Jong Un is just riding it out till the next president. Just like, okay, let's see if we can work things out, try to get these sanctions off, but we're still gonna work on some things. Like they mentioned, like the interviewer mentioned in this video, that they're still producing uranium or still enriching uranium. So they might not necessarily be putting together the bomb, but they get at least the uranium ready that they can, make a bomb from that.
What happens next?
But in the meantime, as we say, they can still produce nuclear fuel. And as you saw after the president left Hanoi, Kim Jong-un stayed there. I mean, he was walking around touring hotspots in Vietnam. He no longer looks like a pariah. Didn't he gain from this?
I don't think that's the president's view at all.
He sat across from the president almost as if an equal.
He did that in Singapore. The president's view is he gave nothing away.
But do you actually believe that?
The president's view is he gave nothing away. That's what matters, not my view. As I've said before, I guess I can't get people to listen, so I'll try it one more time. I'm the national security advisor. I'm not the national security decision maker.
Well, your views have been well documented in the past.
Usually by me. I mean, I've written a lot. In the past.
You've been skeptical for many years.
And as I've said, those views are out there. Anybody can read them. My job now is to help the president, give him his advice, give him my advice. He'll make the decisions.
And to be clear, the administration still is no longer advocating regime change.
The position of the administration is we want denuclearization of North Korea, and that's the objective we're pursuing.
And you still believe that Kim Jong-un can deliver on that?
I think he is the authoritative ruler of that country, and if he were to make the strategic decision to denuclearize, we think it would happen.
The president was asked about this American student, Otto Warmbier, who died tragically after being released after some brutal treatment in North Korean captivity. When was it that the president actually brought up his case to Kim Jong-un?
Well, that was in one of the meetings on the second day, I think. And look, the president in Hanoi. The president's
Is that the first time he brought it up?
No, I think it's been brought up before. I think it was brought up in Singapore. But the president's been very clear. He viewed what happened to Otto Warmbier as barbaric and unacceptable. And I think the best thing North Korea could do right now would be to come up with a full explanation of exactly what happened to him.
But it seemed to suggest that the president, since he said he took Kim Jong-un at his word, was willing to put aside these egregious human rights abuses and basically the killing of an American while in captivity.
Listen, I've heard the president talk about Otto Warmbier on any number of occasions in the Oval Office, and I know how strongly he feels about it. I have no doubt of that whatever.
Before I let you go, I want to ask you, the House Oversight Chairman Elijah Cummings has requested information about your personal security clearance. Is there anything you know of that would have raised a red flag, what he's looking for here?
Not at all. You know, someday I'll be a private citizen again, and I'd be delighted to take this nonsense on in detail. But as a White House official right now, threatened with subpoenas, with a lot of other things that's going on in Congress, I'll take guidance from the White House counsel's office and the Justice Department and just wait for the day when I'm a private citizen.
But counsel, the White House will respond to this.
They will respond to it. That's correct.
Ambassador Bolton, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Former U.S.
I
Army
don't know.
intelligence
I'm trying to figure out what the hell the deal is with that interviewer. Like, what does she want? What does she want? She wants to fucking get in there and topple another regime? I mean, the thing is, like the people in North Korea, like a lot of them are so fanatical. Like at least the inner circle of Kim Jong-un is full of fanatics that will just kill themselves for the chance to protect their dear leader. So, I don't know, bro. I don't know, bro.